Hello, everybody. Welcome to the awkward part of the show where I'm talking to myself alone until other people start to. Um, yeah, I'm hoping that you guys can hear me okay because I have lost the thing that you attach to your headphones when you have an iPhone. I think they call it like a dongle or something. That's a terrible word. What do they call it that? I don't know, but lost it. Don't know where it is, which is weird because it's usually attached to my headphones. So I don't have a proper microphone tonight. Next week I will. So hopefully you guys can hear me. And yeah, this is the part where I just kind of ramble until a few more people show up and we kind of get more on topic. But what is tonight's topic? Well, I've got a great topic for us this evening. We're going to be kind of analyzing Bible verses that supposedly condemn witchcraft, that say that witchcraft is a sin. And we're going to be debunking those. We're going to be looking at historical context, theology, things of that nature. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful time. But first, some housekeeping things, again, while we wait for some more people to show up. So, I got a haircut today. That was one thing. Not anything that significant, just a couple inches off. Oh, we got some people here. Like I said, we're doing some housekeeping things first before we get on topic with the Bible and witchcraft. I have a Patreon. If you haven't started following me on there yet, I just launched it today. Very excited about that. Really simple tiers for now while I'm in school, and then I'll be adding more after I graduate. But if you are not already a part of my Patreon, that is definitely something that you should look into. And make sure you're also following my other socials. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. I haven't posted there in a minute, but I'm working on it. And yeah, so I also just want to put a quick disclaimer, and let me know if you guys can't hear me because my microphone sucks. I'm really sorry. Um, but quick disclaimer: even though we're talking about like the Bible and witchcraft tonight, and I'm a Christian witch and everything like that, I just want it to be very known that everyone is welcome here. Everyone, whether you're an atheist, a pagan, a Christian witch, Christo pagan, whatever it is that you identify as or subscribe to, everyone is welcome here, regardless of the topic that I am talking about. Even though we're talking about the Bible and witchcraft, this is not just a podcast or an episode for Christians or for Christian witches. This is for everyone. So, just wanted to put that out there. And as always, if you have questions, send them in. I'm not going to maybe towards the end, I'll like reserve a specific time for questions, but this is my first time kind of doing this in like a teaching setting. I'm new to this. I might mess up. I might not come across as clearly as I think I am. So if at any point you guys have any questions, please send them in. I did this last week, so I kind of know how the questions work now. I know how to see when I've gotten a message. So if at any point you have a question or you would like to add something to what I'm saying, please do. Okay. Now, on to tonight's topic. So what are we doing tonight with the Bible and witchcraft talk? So, as I said, we're going to be analyzing Bible verses that specifically, quote, condemn witchcraft to gain a better understanding of what they're really saying. We're going to be looking at the historical context of why these verses were written, what they may have originally said, because a lot of these verses were mistranslated or put in there intentionally by people who were afraid of witches, King James. And through all of this, we will be able to use the Bible to justify our craft so that next time someone says, "Isn't witchcraft a sin?" you can go, "Well, actually," and present them with evidence. So, I do have a lot of verse. We're not going to analyze every single verse in the Bible that has this kind of subject matter, or this will be like 3 hours long. No one has time for that. But there are specific verses that I'm going to go through, And you guys can do this however you want. If you want to take notes, if you want to just listen, if you want to ask questions, this I'm very fluid with this. That's how I want it to be. So, but first, the first verse that we're going to turn to is from everyone's favorite book in the Bible, Leviticus. Specifically, this is Leviticus 19:31. This is the ESV version. And the verse says, "Do not turn to mediums or necromancers. Do not seek them out, and so make yourselves unclean by them. I am the Lord your God." Now, what's wrong with this verse? Well, Jesus literally came back from the dead and brought several others back from the dead. Doesn't that kind of make Jesus a necromancer? But if that is the case, then why was this verse put there in the first place? We will come back to that in a few moments. I have notes in front of me, but I'm very bad at organizing them. And then obviously there's the famous TikTok verse, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," or "Thou shalt not allow a witch to live," which is Exodus 22:18. Now, what's wrong with this verse? Well, the word witch was not in the original Hebrew Bible. The Bible originally had the word pharmakeia, which that kind of sounds like our word pharmacy, doesn't it? That's because pharmakeia meant herbalist or poisoner or one who poisons with herbs. So originally, the verse did not say, "Thou shalt not allow a witch to live." It said, "Thou shalt not allow a poisoner to live." Now, regardless of your opinions on the death penalty, that makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? The witch was not added to the Bible until King James. And if you're wondering which King James, the King James version of the Bible, the infamous KJV, that King James. I could do a whole other episode on how King James ruined everything, but this will kind of give you some tidbits on that. But yeah, the word witch was not originally in the Bible at all until King James. So that kind of tells us why some of these verses are there, and then Jesus kind of seems to contradict them, but again, we will come back to that. Next, so something that I really like. So there's a lot of verses in the Bible, as I was saying, that say something like witches or those who practice the magical arts, sorcerers, spiritualists, etc. Now, as I said, I'm not going to go through all of them, or this podcast would be 3 hours long. But examples of such verses, if you'd like to look into them later: Revelation 22:18, 1 Chronicles 10:13 through 14, Nahum, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, 3:4, and 2 Kings 23:24, and many more. And it's the same kind of thing. They all have those kinds of words and that kind of language. But those verses were either put in there by someone else, like King James and his staff, or they originally meant something else and got mistranslated, like the word pharmakeia. The next verse that I want to look at is Deuteronomy 4:19, and I'm looking at the NIV version. And again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. But this verse says, "And when you look up to the sky and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the heavenly array, do not be enticed into bowing down to them and worshiping things the Lord your God have appointed to all nations under heaven." Now, for one thing, a lot of crunchy Christians would argue that this is talking about astrology, but the thing is, at least to my knowledge, I don't know of anyone who is worshiping the sun, the moon, and the stars. There are Roman deities named after the planets and celestial bodies, but that is a deity that you're worshiping. We don't worship the planets when we're doing astrology, right? We use astrology as a tool. So that's thing number one. But thing number two, the thing that I really like about this is that it says, "The Lord your God has appointed to all of the nations." So basically, this verse is kind of saying, don't gatekeep. I gave the sun, the moon, the stars, and the planets to everyone on earth for them to utilize. Don't keep this to yourself. This is for everyone to use, not just some people. So that's kind of how I like to interpret that verse, because yeah, when you can't use this verse as a proper argument against astrology, because astrologers are not worshiping celestial bodies. Next, we have 1 Samuel 15:23, and this is the NIV version. It says, "For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. But you, Saul, have rejected the word of the Lord. He has rejected you, Saul, as king." Context: Saul was given a mission by God, and God was pissed that he didn't go through with it. Divination is being used as an example of things that humans have put before or instead of God, the universe, the deities, whoever it is that you subscribe to. But it never says anything about using them with the divine. Also, a lot of these verses having to do with, don't practice A, B, C, or D was directed toward the Israelites, a specific group of people, not the whole world. Okay, we got our first question, so I'm going to look at this.
No, what you're saying is 100% incorrect. Let me show you a scripture real fast. Let me up here. I'm going to show you something what you're missing.
Okay, you don't have to agree with what I'm doing or what I'm saying, but I am a Christian witch. That's kind of what this page is all about. And if you don't like it, you don't have to be here. Okay, next. Okay, this is another verse that I want to analyze. Deuteronomy 18:9-14, NIV. "When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nations there. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritualist who consults the dead." So I'm going to analyze this line by line, and then I will get to the next message. It's probably the person trying to debunk me, but it's okay. So in the first line, "When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you," God is essentially saying, don't copy what other nations practice or tell you to do. Do what God tells you to do. Do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nation there. The next lines, "sacrificing their son or daughter in the fire," implies that these other nations performed human sacrifices. I'm pretty sure no one on Witch Talk is doing human sacrifices. We'll talk about the divination part on another slide, but again, sorcery, spell casting, witchcraft, King James. Consulting the dead, Jesus raised and consulted the dead. Now, for historical analysis, Deuteronomy 33:8-10 talks about groups of people called the Thummim and the Urim. I might not be pronouncing that right, I'm sorry, who used the above practices to determine if someone was innocent or guilty of a crime rather than giving them a fair trial. So this is also saying, hey, don't use divination instead of giving someone a fair trial. I'm pretty sure most spiritualists today would agree that if someone commits a crime, the way to determine whether or not they are guilty or innocent is not through tarot cards, it's through a fair trial. So I think that is something that can very much be utilized as well. Okay, let's hear this.
So let me up here real quick because I'm going to show you a couple scriptures, and then I'll let you decide from there. Like I said, you say you're a Christian witch, but let's see what the Bible says.
That's the whole point, is I'm looking at what the Bible says. All right, continued. Okay. I didn't write down what specific verse this was, but okay. It says, "He," referring to Manasseh, "sacrificed his children in the fire in the valley of Ben Hinnom, practiced divination and witchcraft, sought omens, and consulted mediums and spiritualists. He did much evil in the eyes of the Lord." Now, again, this is talking about a specific person doing specific things. This is not talking about the world. This is talking about a specific person named Manasseh. Witchcraft, again, King James. It was probably a different word before King James put the word witchcraft in. Now, Manasseh's quote-unquote witchcraft was through human sacrifice and harm to children. Now, historically, there were nations and people who did this, but we have since then realized that it is completely inhumane to do this kind of thing in magic and witchcraft. Therefore, it no longer applies. Now, I've received 2 messages, so let's take a look.
Are you not gonna let me on your panel? Like I said, I just wanted to show you a couple of scriptures, and I want you to define what these scriptures are talking about.
I think you have to request. I'm still new to stereo, so I apologize. I think you have to request to like coho. I don't know how this works, but I have a set script for this podcast. This is a part of my job. But I'm still relatively new to stereo, so I don't know how to have you speak if it's not in the form of asking questions. You're more than welcome to submit your Bible verses through the question voice box thing. This is only my second time doing this show. I don't really know how this app works still. So thank you for understanding.
So I think it's recording. Okay, anyway. So I'm not a Christian, but I am a practitioner. And I've heard that Psalms is a book of spells. How do you feel about that?
I love this question. Psalms is absolutely spells. Um, I don't have it completely memorized. I will admit that I am not perfect at this. But I do know that the Psalms is a book of spells. And there are many books on this that you can find on the subject. I would actually love, again, I'll have that written down on my list of ideas for future podcasts. I could do a whole series about how to use the Psalms in your magical practices. So yes, even though I'm not perfectly versed in it, I absolutely do believe that Psalms is a book of spells. All right, we've got one more.
There is a button that you see right next to your head. It should have a +1 or a 1 over top of it. If you press that, you'll see me. Just say let in.
No, I don't see that, and I think that's just because this is a scheduled talk, and I did not schedule to have a co-host with me. So I apologize. Um, anyway, I'm going to move on with my show. What's next?
I'm really interested in hearing about, and I know it's not in the like modern day Bible, but I'd love to hear about a good resource to go to read about the Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
Yes, so if you're here, I'm assuming that means that you follow me on TikTok. If you go to my TikTok and you click the link in my bio where my link tree is, somewhere in my link tree, you will find my resource list that has all of my beginner spirituality and witchcraft resources. Now, somewhere in that resource list, you will find what is called the Nag Hammadi Library. And that is a free website that you can access these scriptures with. And through doing that, you will be able to find the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. It is kind of in pieces, it's in fragments, it's not perfect, but you will absolutely be able to find it. I have one more message. I swear to God, I need to learn how to block people on here. Oh, it said from a nice person. Okay, we like nice people.
Hello. I'm wondering how you feel about the Gospel of Thomas, or if you've done much research on that, and how it fits into the Christianity that you practice and also your craft.
I have read the Gospel of Thomas. It has been a minute. I actually have a book version on my shelf right now. Yes, I have read it. I thought it was very fascinating. I love reading through the Nag Hammadi Library, which has like I said, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, etc. I do. I find it deeply fascinating. There are different sects of Gnosticism, just like there's different sects of Christianity. Um, so there's some aspects of Gnosticism that I do believe in and some aspects of Gnosticism that I don't believe in, but reading these Gnostic texts and interpreting them in my own way is something that I very much incorporate into my practice. um, like I said, it's been a while since I've read the Gospel of Thomas. I honestly don't remember much of what it says. I believe this is one of many Gnostic texts that implies that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married and had children together, which is something heartedly. Okay, so we've gone through the analyzing of these Bible verses. What now? Well, for one thing, did you notice that most of the Bible verses that I analyzed came from the Old Testament? That's because in the New Testament, Jesus comes and flips it all around. Now, here's the thing, there are still things in the New Testament that I don't agree with. As I pointed out earlier, there is a verse in Revelation that talks about witchcraft, spirituality, necromancy. I don't remember what it specifically says, but there's not nearly as much of it in the New Testament as there is in the Old Testament. And I feel like most people who have read the Bible would agree that the New Testament and the Old Testament are pretty much different books. Um, there's a verse that I put here in my notes that says, I have come into the world as light so that no one who believes in me should stay in the darkness. And that's John 12:46. That was the NIV version. And the whole reason in Christianity, if you want to believe in Christian witchcraft, the whole reason that God sent Jesus to earth in the first place is because we were doing everything wrong. And so we needed someone to show us how to do things right. And that is said in the Bible, that humanity was looking for a king and they didn't want all of these human kings. And then, of course, in Judaism, prophesy of a Messiah. And if you believe in Christianity, then maybe you believe that Jesus was the Messiah, or maybe you just believe that he was a really great teacher. Either way, I definitely believe that he was sent here for a reason. I don't necessarily believe that he was sent here to free humanity from their sins, but I definitely still think that he was a significant and important figure, which is why I work with him in my craft. But okay, so, what does this mean when I say that, Jesus came and flipped everything around? So I like to use what I call the flower analogy. The flower analogy is basically this. So I want you guys to imagine you come home one day from school or work or whatever, and there's a bouquet of flowers at your door, and they're from your significant other. That's so sweet. Isn't that so nice? They got you flowers. Now imagine you come home from school or work or whatever, and there's a bouquet of flowers on your door from your stalker. It's the same gift. You get flowers either way. It's the same gift, but the source, your partner versus your stalker, is very different. I do believe in good and evil. Now, do I believe that good and evil are exactly black and white, how it is in the Bible, like angels are good and demons are bad? No, I don't believe in that. But I do believe that there is such a thing as good and evil. And I'm pretty sure the majority of people on Witch Talk would say the same thing. There is a difference between good and bad. There are positive energies and negative energies. So we all have divine powers, but do we use them correctly? And when new gifts arise, who is giving them to us? These are the kinds of questions that we need to be asking ourselves on our spiritual journeys. Think of the flower analogy. That analogy has been with me my whole life. I'm putting it in a different context now. It used to be in a very toxic Christianity context, and changing it up for good. But that's something that I think is a really good way of looking at the divine world. I definitely think that before Jesus came, maybe people were allowing more negative energies, or they just didn't know how to utilize their abilities properly. I don't know. I wasn't there. These are all things that we can just kind of theorize based on things that we read. But all in all, we weren't there. We didn't see what happened with our own eyes. There's no way to know what happened if we weren't there. But that's just the analogy that I like to use. Anyway, so who/what is your source? I go to this Bible verse, which is John 4:1-3, or First John 4:1-3, the NIV version. It says, "Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. This is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, but every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. Now, I don't agree with everything in this verse, because not all of you are going to work with Jesus or the Christian God or whatever, but you can see the point, right? Don't trust everything that comes your way. And, if you guys want, I can make TikTok videos, or we can even talk about that at the end, talking about how do you know if you have good or bad energy in your house? How do you know if something is good or bad? We can talk about that if you guys want. But the point is, spirits do come to us, and we do have power. We just have to be careful with it. With great power comes great responsibility. But it's true. It really is. And my favorite verse that I love to use with crunchy Christians who say you can't be a Christian and a witch is, "For nothing is impossible with God." Luke 1:37. And then you also, I didn't include this in my note because I wrote this a long time ago, but I know this stuff off the top of my head. A lot of the things that Jesus did could very much be considered witchy miracles, quote unquote. He picked up the mud and he spat in it and then put it in the person's eyes that was blind, and they could see again. We talk about use of bodily fluids in witchcraft all the time. We talk about use of the earth to heal in witchcraft all the time. Walking on water, levitation, turning water into wine could be viewed as either a glamour or alchemy. There's so many things. And then obviously raising the dead. I think there was Lazarus. I believe there was a child that he raised from the dead. There were some, people with various ailments and sicknesses and handicaps that he healed, and that's not to say that people with sicknesses or ailments or disabilities need fixing, quote unquote. That's not the point that I'm trying to come across. But the point is that these people were wow, I can't talk. People were in search of healing, and it was given to them instantly. And if you are a Christian witch, or you believe in what Jesus has to say in any capacity, then you probably agree with the idea that we are supposed to be like Jesus. And it is in my personal view that if we are to be like Jesus, that witchcraft is the only answer. With all of the incredible things that Jesus did. And that's just, we only know a little bit. We only know a handful of the story because Jesus's missing years are missing. And there's 1.5 million books that you can read about Jesus's missing years, what he did from age 13 to 29. But again, there's no way to really know how much of that is true because we weren't there, and the authors most likely weren't there. But I think it's really important to think about all of that, and to think about all the different perspectives that you could look at Jesus with, and just be open-minded about it. But, despite what that one guy was saying, I'm a Christian witch, and there's lots of us. There are so many of us. And if any of you are interested in further resources, I recommend The Path of a Christian Witch by Adelina St. Clair, literally any book by the author Valerie Love, the book Jesus Through Pagan Eyes by Barbara Erskine, Mark Townsend, and Matthew Fox, and Christian Wicca by Nancy Chandler Pittman. And then there is also a Christian Witches website, which is just www.christianwitches.com. So, man, I really thought this would be longer. I am going to open this up to questions. That was all that I had in my notes. Again, I'm still new at this. This is only my second show. As I do more of these, I'm sure they will get longer, more intense, and especially as we have more participants asking more questions. But yeah, so I'm going to if you guys, I'm going to have this be like our question and answer session. If you guys have any, I know that it might take a minute to submit questions, so I'm just going to keep talking until I get any. And if I don't, then we'll be done. But yeah, my hope. Oh, okay. We got a question.
Future reference for every single person that joins. Don't be like Philip. Philip was horrible. It's the new standard, as long as you're better than Philip.
Yes, as long as you're better than Philip. And for those of you who are listening to this later on Patreon, Philip was the guy that was trying to get on the live with me and try to debate me and whatever. I really need to learn how to block people on here. I'm still new to this app, but we'll figure it out, right? Oh, I got another one.
I've been wanting to ask you this for a while now because I've been following you on TikTok for a while, but I don't think I understand the difference in when you're talking about like Yeshua versus the Christian God versus maybe some other deities that are of Christian origin that you work with or talk to or worship. And I just was wondering like what the difference is. Is Jesus the same as Yeshua? Am I like going too far into this? I guess that's just my big question because you talk about Yeshua a lot.
That's a great question. So yes, Yeshua was Jesus's real name. That was a very common name back then. It's actually where we get Joshua from nowadays. But just, over time through the evolution of language, it got shortened to Jesus. But just out of respect, I like to refer to him by his actual name. And I also feel that it humanizes him a bit because one of my favorite things about Yeshua is that even though he is a deity, he has lived and experienced the human experience. So yes, Yeshua is Jesus. It is his real name. When I'm referring to the Christian God, some people, and I'm only saying this for educational purposes only, some people refer to him as Yahweh, but you're actually not supposed to say it like that. It's kind of a bastardization of the name, which I did not know until recently. So again, I was only saying it for educational purposes. But so now I just say the Christian God, but that is referring to like God the Father in Christianity or Yeshua's divine Father, if that makes sense. Now, in traditional Christianity, you may hear like Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, right? So, Father is the Christian God, the Son being Yeshua. In my personal practice and in various sects of Gnosticism, Sophia is akin to the Holy Spirit, seen as the Queen of Heaven, a female figure. And like I said, she is equated with the Holy Spirit in some traditions. It depends on what tradition you're looking at, right? Because some traditions say different things. But that's what I believe in. That is what I follow. I have also talked about the goddess Asherah, who is, again, depending on what tradition you're analyzing, viewed as the wife and or consort of the Christian God. She was erased from history. Oh, I should write that down. I should do a podcast show about her. I'm getting so many ideas just as I'm talking. But yes, Asherah. I have talked about her on my page before in a really great book all about her, and mentioned Sophia as well, called When God Had a Wife by Lynn Picknett. Great book, excellent book. I should probably read it again. And yeah, at some point, maybe just do a whole podcast episode dedicated to the Christian divine feminine. All right, we've got some more questions.
That's the first time I've ever heard that Yahweh is not supposed to be used as a name for God. I grew up in the Christian church, and that's new for me. Could you tell me more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I grew up in the Christian church using that name as well. My entire life, like we called him that. But you know, as flawed as social media can be, one of the benefits of social media is that it connects you to people from all over the world, all different backgrounds, all different belief systems, right? In Judaism, they do not call him by that name. And it is viewed as offensive and at times even anti Semitic to call him by that name. Now, obviously, if you don't know that, they're going to understand, right? But um, yes, it is very offensive to Jewish people. I have a lot of Jewish people who are following me, Jewish witches, people who practice the Kabbalah who follow me. And they were very nice and very gracious at times where I did say the name, but they were like, hey, listen, could you please not say that name? This is why. It's viewed as like an insult or a bastardization of that name. The Hebrew letters that spell out the God's name are equivalent to like YHWH, which is in English, which is where that name comes from. But the reason why it is spelled that way with no vowels is because in the Jewish tradition, God's name is so sacred that it's not supposed to be said. So therefore, calling him the name Yahweh is kind of it's a bastardization. And so just out of respect for Jewish people and their tradition, especially because I have lots of lovely and amazing Jewish people following me, I have to stop using that name and just refer to him as the Christian God. Let's see what we have next.
Can you please do a podcast on Asherah?
Love to do a show on Asherah. Again, I'm kind of thinking things on the spot. I have a list of ideas, but yes, I would love to do an episode on, yeah, like the Christian divine feminine or things like that. And if you are, we're going to do a little shameless plug here. If you're following me on Patreon, you will be able to vote on topics for future podcasts. I do have the next one planned, which I will talk about in a moment, just because I like to plan ahead. But after next week's, I don't have any definitive plans yet. So, yeah, I would love to get that talking about that, maybe do a show on Asherah, maybe do a show on something else. And also, this show isn't just going to be about Christian witchcraft, it'll be about witchcraft and occultism in general. But I also understand that lots of people are curious about Christian witchcraft and how they can incorporate Jesus and Sophia and Asherah and the Christian God into their practice. So hopefully it'll be a good, healthy mix of those things. Let's see what else we've got.
I think I'm wondering how. Sorry, now I feel dumb because I should have written this down before I started talking. So you make deity candles for all these different pantheons and stuff. How do you think that all the different pantheons, deities, us all as spiritual beings, kind of come together? Like, what is the relating factor that you think is happening? I guess I just want a perspective from someone who is still practicing Christianity, because I came from that background, but I am not in that anymore.
That's a great question. So that's a deep question. It's not a super easy one to answer, but in short, I am an omnist. And if you don't know what omnism is, it is the belief that every religion is correct in its own way. I might not agree with every single thing that is taught in every single religion, right? Because there's a million religions out there. I'm not going to agree with everything that is preached in every religion. However, I do believe that every religion is correct in its own way or has aspects that is correct. As far as where do I think the gods came from? I don't know. Do I believe that they're out there? Yes, I do. I believe that there are many, many gods out there. Or maybe there is, there's a theory that there is one god and one goddess, and they just go by different names in different cultures. Who knows? Who's to say? I don't know. But regardless, if you ask me to make a deity candle for Froya, I absolutely believe that Froya is real. If you ask me to make a candle for your dragon, I absolutely believe that your dragon is real. Like I do absolutely believe in these spirits. Um it's a little mind-boggling because there are probably so many, and my humanness wants to ask the question, well, why do we need so many gods? And there is no answer to that. I don't know. Um, but I believe that every religion has aspects that are correct. And I believe that every culture is just has so much beauty to it. Um, but yeah, I do. I believe in the Christian God. I believe in Allah. I believe in the pagan gods. I believe in angels and demons and dragons and the fair folk and every other entity in the book. Um, yeah, so I guess because I am an omnist, by proxy, I have to believe that the Christian God exists as well, that Jesus existed as well, because that's part of the religion. And really, the whole reason why I do still very much consider myself a Christian witch because I work with Yeshua, but I'm probably not the traditional Christian witch that you may come across because I do work with pagan deities. I guess I would identify as Christo-pagan. But when I was first going on my witchcraft journey, I was very intrigued by witchcraft, but I didn't want to leave my relationship with Jesus because I love Jesus and I love his message and I love what he was all about. And when I learned that I could pursue this path and still have Jesus by my side, I was like, hell yes, sign me up. I don't know if I can swear on this app. I'll have to look into that. It's an 18 plus app. I have to imagine I can swear. Um, but I don't know if that answers your question. I I did my best. I hope you liked that. Um, all right, I'm going to talk for a few more minutes and see if I get any more questions. And if I don't, that's completely fine. And if I do, that is also completely fine. I can keep this going for 2 hours if I keep getting questions, but if not, that is also okay. This is already about 10 minutes longer than my last show, which makes me happy. I wanted to have be at least like a half hour each, if not more. Um, I'm totally fine with them being longer. If you guys have questions, I'll stay here all night and answer you guys' questions. Ooh, I got a question.
This isn't a question, but King James was bisexual.
I love this. I love that so much. Um, oh, what's happening? Uh, what is happening? Sorry, my phone was glitching there for a second. Yes, I've seen theories that King James is bisexual, that he was gay, that, you know, so, and maybe he even put in the verses about homosexuality. Again, I could do a whole podcast on that as well. The Bible and the LGBTQ plus community and why everything that King really I should just do an episode on King James. Here's everything that King James ruined. He ruined witchcraft, he ruined the LGBTQ community, all that stuff. Yeah, and given that he lived in the 1400s, that was obviously going to be a taboo. So he's like, well, no one can know my dirty little secret. Therefore, I'm gonna put it in the Bible. Okay. Um. Oh, I just got so distracted there for a second because I saw that my favorite singer tweeted something. It's okay. Uh. Oh boy, I got 3 messages. Let's see.
It was good enough. I'm just kidding. It was great. I appreciate you responding to that. I had not heard of Omnis before. I think that's going to be probably one of the next things that I'm looking into. I personally would really like if you went to Sophia and Ashura and did some segments over those in the coming weeks, months, whatever.
Yeah, maybe I'll make that my thing this weekend while my boyfriend plays video games. I'll read When God Had a Wife. I've read it already. And I remember the first time I read it, I like highlighted it and I took notes and all this stuff. And then my parents destroyed it when that whole incident happened in May. So I got another copy of the book, but all my notes are gone. So I'll have to start looking into that again. Because I've noticed that Asherah and Sophia, and I feel like a lot of people like a lot of things about Christianity, but they don't have that divine feminine. And that's something that I was saying when I was first starting out. So I hope that if I talk about that more, that'll give people a little bit of an outlet.
I'm still kind of grappling with everything. So I'm just trying to think of like when I'm doing my own worship, then like what names are acceptable, or like, I guess specifically not anti-Semitic, that I could use for the Christian God. I know there's like Abba for like Abba Father, but I'm also trying to kind of deconstruct that in my mind, because I'm trying to work on more calling God as a they, because I don't really see them as having gender. Anyhow, this is really long, but yeah, that's my question.
I love that. So I am also of the belief that God does not have a gender. I have used Abba in the past because with God not having a gender, that means that they can take on a maternal form and a paternal form. So if I'm in a situation where I need that kind of paternal figure or masculine energy, that is when I will use Abba. I have used Emmanuel a handful of times, which is also sometimes another word used for Jesus. Um, of course, because I'm on the spot, I can't think of any off the top of my head. But something that you can do, that I know for a fact that you can do, is honestly just go to Google and type in names for God used in the Bible. There's like 60 different names for God used all throughout the Bible. And some of them might be masculine, some of them might be neutral, or they could be construed as neutral, you know. And there are also verses in the Bible that portray God as a mother and a father. So a quick Google search and finding one or 12 that you like and that suit what you're looking for, especially, and if you can look into like the translations of those names and what they mean, because it might, a certain name might be fitting for a certain setting. Like I said, if you're using Abba during a time where you need masculine energy, if that makes sense.
He admitted to not liking the verses, some of the wording in the verses of the Alpha Omega Bible and the other Bibles, and he admitted to changing them. And he wasn't even Christian.
Yeah, King James, he did. He ruined everything. And yeah, he changed a lot of things to fit um the culture of the time that he lived in. And this was a time where the state was very much ruled by the church. And so he formatted the Bible to fit with the laws of the time period that he lived in, so that if anyone questioned his laws or his teachings or his rulings, he could say, well, it's in the Bible. So and also a lot of his translators that worked along translating his version of the Bible were not familiar with Greek, so a lot of the Greek Bible stuff got mistranslated. It's great. Great.
So her question was getting me thinking about like her name's like, it's like El Shaddai, and oh my god, now I just feel dumb because I can't remember any other ones, but the ones start with like El. The names for spirit god in the Old Testament, usually they start with like El, like El. Are those anti-Semitic, or are those okay?
So again, to my knowledge, those other names would be okay to use because, um, okay, so the reason why there are so many different names for God in the Bible is because his name was unspeakable. It was so sacred that you could not say it. That's why they had I have to think of it every time in my head, the YHWH in the Hebrew letters, because you couldn't actually say his name. So they used all those other names instead. But the reason why Yahweh is not one of those names that we can use is because it is a bastardization of I forget what they call it, the tetra something. I forget what it's called. But it is a bastardization of that YHWH. So that's why we say that name in particular. But because, like I said, because you can't say God's true name or the bastardization, they had all these other names come up with so that they would have something to call him by, because that is how humans communicate with names and words. So if they couldn't say his true name or have true words to call him by, they came up with others. So, yes, those other names like Abba, Emmanuel, etc., the ones that you said, would be perfectly fine to use. Okay, we'll see if some more questions come in. If they do, that's fine. If they don't, that's fine. But next for me to talk about is next week. So as I said, I have next week's segment planned out, kind of. And from then on out, I have ideas, but I don't have any definitive plans. Again, if you subscribe to me on Patreon, you vote on those ideas. But next week, I want to talk about kind of deconstructing specifically sexual shame and purity culture, which is a very heavy topic, but I think is something that needs to be discussed, especially coming from me, from someone who is queer and has dealt with a great deal of sexual shame in the church. It's something that I want to talk about, and something that I think that a lot of people will want to hear about. And honestly, you know, whether you, no matter your thoughts about it, I feel like more people would feel comfortable hearing about it from a woman and from someone who has been there. So that's going to be kind of next week's topic. I'm going to kind of share with you guys my personal story on purity culture shaming within the church, and answer questions about that, and also just talk about how I overcame it, because I no longer deal with that sense of shame. So I'm going to talk to you guys about the specific steps that I took, and the research that I did, and the things that I discovered to help me overcome that sense of shame. I basically got to a point where I was like, this is stupid that I'm ashamed of this part of myself. So we'll be talking about how I got there and how you guys can get there too. So I'm really excited about that. I hope that you guys are excited about that. Ooh, what do we got? What do we got?
That's awesome. I'm really excited to hear about your take on purity culture and just everything that surrounds that. Yeah, that's something my husband and I have been really diving into as well, just being like, yeah, so that was really messed up. But yeah, thank you so much for today, and thank you for your patience with questions and the not questions from other people. But yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'll give you guys a little spoiler for next week so that you have something to look forward to. So, if you follow me on TikTok, I make videos and jokes about my boyfriend all the time. We've been together for 4.5 years. But when we first got together, like we'd only been dating for about 2 months, the first time I brought my boyfriend to church ever, and this was my first boyfriend too. I've never been with anyone else. He is my first and only partner that I've ever had. So, the first time I bring my first brand new boyfriend to church, the sermon just so happened to be on abstinence. Crickets. More on that story next week. Make sure that you're following me on TikTok if you're new. If you just kind of stumbled across my page for some reason, hi, thanks. Follow me on TikTok. Click the link in my TikTok bio to find all my other socials, and Patreon if you want to vote on topics for the future. Oh, I got another message.
Can you do a podcast about the witchy child adventures?
Well, I would love to do an episode just on children in general. For those of you who don't know, I do not actually have any children. Those skits are completely fictional. However, because of a lot of the trauma that I had been through with my parents, those skits kind of give me an outlet to express how I will treat my future children when the day does come that I have them, because I do want children in the future. I don't want them right now, but I do want them 8 to 10 years from now. So I kind of use those as an outlet for things that I will do as a mother that were not given to me when I was a child. Um, and that's absolutely something that we could talk about, like religious shame with parents, or there's lots of resources for things that, like introducing children to witchcraft without indoctrinating them or being weird about it, because I feel like I have a lot of parents following me on TikTok, and I feel like a lot of them would want to share their craft with their children if they aren't already, have a fear of it coming off as indoctrination. So that's absolutely, even though I'm not a parent, I grew up with very young siblings. I know just as much about babies, I promise. I know that's a bold statement, but um, yeah, I would love to do an episode where I talk about things that you can do with your children to introduce them to the craft. There's children's books about it, there's toys, there's all these different things. So even though I do not have any children myself, I would love to talk about that and talk about parenthood and what that will be like in the future for me when the day comes. Um, but yeah, as I was saying, next week, purity culture. In the future, if you would like to be able to vote on topics and vote on other things, like I'm not just going to give voting power to the podcast, like you guys will be able to vote on lots of things. But if you would like to be able to vote on podcast topics, make sure that you subscribe to me on Patreon. It's only $5 a month to have that voting power. And you get some other bonuses as well. And then I have $1 a month, $5 a month, and $7 a month on my Patreon, different tiers. But in the future, I will be adding more after I graduate and have more time. Make sure that you're following me on TikTok at spirituality.t. Instagram and Twitter are also spirituality. I'm going to try and get my YouTube channel up and going again. But yeah, I'm excited for next week. Thank you guys so much for all of your questions and for keeping your cool when Philip was being an asshole. And I will see you guys next week. Blessed be.